What's up? Today I'm talking to Kienen Koga, a construction engineer in Hawaii. We have a pretty casual conversation about our careers in construction and structural engineering, our university experiences, and how much money these two careers make. If you want to know more about a career in construction engineering, Kienen also has a YouTube channel focused on that, so make sure to go check that out. That's linked in the description below. And I've time-stamped all of our conversations, so if you just want to skip around, make sure to check those out down below. And please excuse some of the technical difficulties that we had. If you hear any audio issues, it's not you, it's me. So grab your cup of coffee and enjoy.
Today I have Mat Picardal. I'm sure if everybody was actually watching engineering YouTube, you probably knew of him before you even knew about me. But anyway, thank you, Matt, for coming on. We'll be willing to talk to, I guess, both of our channels today. So just kind of give a little bit of background for anybody who hasn't met you before, or what you do, how long you've been in the industry, just kind of a quick little thing about everything about you.
Yeah, thanks, Keenan. Thanks for having me on. I know this is, I get a lot of questions from students and engineers that want to get into construction engineering or civil engineering or structural engineering. So it's great to have you. You're working in the construction engineering field too. So I myself am really interested to learn about that. For me, I've been in the structural engineering industry for about 6 or 7 years now. So I'm a structural project manager at the firm I'm working for, and yeah, I pretty much do YouTube on the side, and just sharing my passion for structural engineering and trying to pass my licensing exam at the same time. It can be tough, but it's been a fun journey for me.
Yeah, for anyone that doesn't know about the structural engineering exams, I just did my video about taking the PE exam. I mean, that's baby food compared to what Matt's trying to do right now. So it's a tough test. So it's hats off to you for going through. Then I guess for this channel, I'm Keenan. I started making YouTube videos. Originally, I was making it about personal finance, and kind of morphed into kind of what I do as my job in construction engineering. I work for a big general contractor here in Hawaii, just doing a bunch of different. I've done a couple high rises, I've done renovation, and I've done to date. So I've been in the industry just over maybe like 6.5 to 7 years, and yeah, just having the time of my life. Got my civil engineering degree from the University of Washington. So it's yeah, a couple of engineers, making things YouTube. Apparently, so that's a little side work. So I guess why did you choose civil? What was your thought behind choosing civil engineering, and why did you go to the structural route? Kind of start there.
Yeah, I think the quick version of it is when I was younger, I'd be watching those modern engineering TV shows, where the one that stood out to me was like the Taipei 101. They did like a show about the Taipei 101 and how engineering wise it had all of these problems, and then the engineers would solve it. And those buildings wouldn't be standing up unless those engineering problems got solved. And that's how I pretty much even just put civil engineering in the running. Then went to college and got to try out all the civils. I like geotech and I like structures, but I ended up choosing structures mainly because to me, it made more of an impact. I know all of the disciplines have an impact in their own way, but for me personally, seeing structures go up and things that you personally designed and seeing them being built and the scale that they're being built to, that was the coolest thing for me. And even when I got to actually see my first building go up, there's nothing like it, especially when it's your first time and you actually get to design something and get see it built, and just seeing the scale of it, and especially after it's being used by people and it's like an impactful thing in society. Like you were part of that community that you just like helped design, and seeing it being used. That's the thing, man. It was the impact. I think not a lot of careers can have that where you can actually see the things that are being built and you can actually see people use it. So for me, that was a big thing.
That's actually super interesting because like I feel the same way, but it's about because you're like that's the building I designed, right? And like for us, it's like that's what we built, right? So
Yeah, it's you
you
actually
know,
built.
yeah, that's the funny thing, right? Is that's us contractor. We'll have when you're building the job, there's sometimes a tendency to like when you see the designers come out and you're just like these guys don't even know what we're going through, right? And but there's so much when you really take a step back, it's interesting to see, right? There's so much pride in what you do, and for us or for me specifically, it's I liked seeing what we did, and I mean if you did it right, I mean it should be there for a long time, right? And that's a landmark in your life. You can drive around. Every building has a story about that's not just a sidewalk. We had to redo that 3 times because of whatever, right? Or the guy make his decision, so we had to figure out how to make all these curves work and all that kind of stuff. So it's just funny to hear that you guys have the same thought, and I think that's what makes engineering really, really cool.
Yeah, and I think in general for the AEC architectural engineering construction industry, what I've noticed is when projects go well and they're not like nightmare projects, it's everybody. Everyone has their, it's not just the architect, it's all the mechanical, electrical, plumbing contractors, subcontractors. They all take pride in what they do, and the building couldn't be built or completed without them or designed. And I think that's what's cool about it. At the end of the day, everyone plays their part. Everyone's takes pride in what they do, and the buildings wouldn't be built without everyone working together. At the end of the day, during construction, I know it's stuff's on fire and everyone's screaming at each other sometimes, but like when it's done and it's built, I think that's when everything's like, yeah, it was worth it, going through all that.
I think that's a good segue into because when you're in the middle of the build, that's for us one of the most stressful times. And our not the biggest issue, but a big issue is that a lot of times things will happen in the field, things will come up, and you'll need consultants, all the designers to basically come up with an answer for you, because you as a contractor aren't supposed to make those kinds of design decisions. It's supposed to go to the professionals that specialize in it. But a lot of times we put the designers in the hot seat, and maybe it's not in the best way all the times, but we definitely need everybody working together for the same goal. Sometimes you'll have designers that I guess maybe don't see the urgency that we see in the field sometimes, and that can be a little frustrating when we're trying to progress on the job. So yeah, when everyone's kind of moving together, understanding, and I guess a lot of times respecting each other's work, I think that's what really helps things out. So for you, what kind of things do you wish contractors would do, or people in construction engineering, or what helps you out the most, I guess I should say, when you with the generals?
Yeah, I guess for the contractors, well, you're right. It's maybe like, things that I wish contractors would do, or things like that. Uh, I think the point that you're bringing up, or what it kind of reminds me of, like, yeah, you'll get phone calls, or the engineers will get phone calls from people in the field, the contractors in the field. And sometimes they need answers like now, or more realistically, yesterday. Like, yeah, we need those like as soon as possible. And I could probably, I guess one thing that I'd like the contractors to know, or maybe just in general, is that in terms of our industry, structural engineering industry, most likely the engineers are working on multiple projects at the same time. There's deadlines for all those. And so that's why I think sometimes it can be tough to get a hold, or try to get in contact. Like maybe you call them and they're on a meeting for another project or something like that. But I think what would be more, to your point, we're in the office. and we don't see the fire that's out there. It's like you guys are on the front lines, and if it's urgent, and you guys are actually seeing like why it's urgent, like concrete's going to be poured like in a couple minutes or something like that. And yeah, there are times where it's an emergency, and for me personally, I always try to think of it like uh, what's the best way to solve that problem with the contractors in mind too, if they have solutions, and if we can get it uh, resolved in the most efficient way, that's good for the whole team. But also knowing like the urgency, like, is it really that urgent, or is it like everything can't be on fire. Sometimes we'll get like, guys, this is urgent, and then it's like, wait, there's like 5 submittals. Which one is the most urgent? Or things
and
like
that's
that.
yeah, that is, I don't know if that's considered old school style or if that's maybe just a personality thing, but yeah, that's for sure. Well, sometimes too, I guess it depends on how long it's been sitting out there, but it is not the best practice to, working in construction and to basically inundate the consultants with all of your submittals and say all of this is due tomorrow, right? Because that usually means that you just didn't do your job in planning and doing things and executing things properly. And to put that onto someone else's plate is not the best thing. But sometimes things happen, and you need quick answers. So
yeah. So for me, it's I try to get clarification on that. It's like, okay, what really needs to get done, and if it is, then I'll do my part to help the team out, and if we need to get it out, let's get it out, and let's get the project going.
And I think one thing that you said too that's super important is, I think a lot, I would assume that you guys appreciate it a lot when we do come up with solutions, that we don't just throw a question out there. A lot of times they don't really know how things actually get put together, I would say, unless you've had a lot of field experience. So if you have a solution and a fix for some sort of issue that you see in the field that's buildable, that they can just, say yes or no to, then you can get your answer a lot quickly when you're working in the field. So I think that's it also shows that you are trying to help them out. That's why you want to make thorough RFIs, do thorough submittal reviews, helps out reviewing it, show that, hey, yeah, this person does understand my drawings, right? The person does understand what they're doing, and you can get things a lot quicker. I mean, I think that's just part of it. So
yeah, the communication, it's obviously the more experience you have, or the more years of experience you have, the better positioned you are to come up with construction solutions that might just come up during the field. But I found it just even getting on the phone call, man. It's like the communication, right? Sure. Like, hey, you guys got this problem out in the field. Here's what we're thinking of doing. Is that even plausible? So before we even start doing all these sketches, and then you guys may say, no, that's not buildable. What if you guys did this? Then we'll do that back and forth. And then, okay, we got a direction that we want to go in. Let's go into that. Mistake I see some young engineers do is, okay, they get an email from the contractor saying like, hey, can you guys do a fix for this? And they just come up with some fancy detail that they think will work. And then they send it out. And then the contractor will be like, this isn't buildable at all. Like, we can't do this. And then they have to, there's like that unnecessary back and forth, and so much wasted time between both sides. Just picking up the phone, or just even listening to both sides, because you get, like I said, you guys are on the front lines. You guys know what's out there and what you guys can do as the contractor, like what's buildable.
Right. And even, picking up the phone is so key, especially if you need an answer quickly. To send out an electronic file without any prior communication is one of the worst ways to get your answer quickly. And I mean, imagine too, say it's even a complex problem that, you're writing this RFI, it's very detailed, but it's, 2 pages long. Like, human nature says that the person that receives it is going to be like, oh, I don't have time for this, right? And then if they actually know what the problem is, they know what the solution is, and they just have to kind of process it through, that's the quickest way to get your answer. So yes, very, very, very true. Yeah, pick up even too. We've done FaceTime calls too. I mean, if you're an Android user, sorry, but I mean, a lot of times that's been really helpful for us to just, a lot of times our consultants are outside of Hawaii, and just to FaceTime them, show them the problem, they can see the
Oh
situation,
yeah.
the surroundings. I mean, it's that's been pretty good too. So
Yeah, show me the pictures, show me
communication,
what's out there.
yeah,
It makes everyone's life yeah, definitely
yeah,
better. We'll take advantage of all the technology that's out there for us, because yeah, with communication, man, I think that's like the biggest thing.
yeah. And that's why too, they like engineers have that stigma of, you know, being these like little nerds that just are introverted and they're just doing their thing. But if you're not communicating, if you're not a team player, you're not gonna do well in either one of these industries, whether you're, you know, at a desk, you know, working in structural engineering, or if you're in the field. You have to be able to talk to people. You have to be able to work with people. So
Yeah.
super
It
important.
reminds me of like even to some contractors that I talk to, it's like they're, because with like those stereotypes, yeah, it's a stereotype for, because some engineers are like that. Even for me, I wasn't born like being comfortable talking on the phone, but I knew it was a necessary skill that I learned and got better at like throughout the years. But yeah, some of them, they don't change. And what do you call it? They're, when I talk to some contractors, they're like afraid to contact the structural engineer because they'll like scream at him and like, oh,
Really?
what the hell are you guys doing out there? You gotta do a fix.
Oh, the contractor. Yeah,
Yeah. It's like, oh man, I don't want to talk to the engineer.
yeah. Dude, do you have, yeah, sure. Do you have any horror stories, bad, or like I mean, you can make up names or whatever, but do you have anything like where you encountered something that was a little over the top, or you thought was, or maybe one that you thought was really good?
Yeah, I think yeah, like when I guess some stories that out in the field when I was talking to some contractors is like, to them they would complain about structural engineers that would basically, like, they weren't good to talk to on the phone. Like they were grumpy, they were uh always scream at them, and like always like I don't know, berate them. They weren't nice to talk to. And even like when they would, so what, and that sucks, because what that leads to is they're going to try to come up with like a solution, or try to fix it, or try to hide it from the engineer, which, you know, we don't want. But because if you're having the attitude and the contractor doesn't want to communicate with you, well, that's some part on it, on the structural engineers, maybe personality, or easiness to work with, because you don't want that from either sides. So I think things like that, where like yeah, they were trying to come up with stuff like, oh man, we don't want to get this, how do we make a solution that doesn't need the structural engineer's input? And I was like, oh, that's not the best way to do it, but I can kind of
Yeah,
see why you wouldn't want to get the engineers point on that. But to us, that's very important. Like we want to know what's going out in the field, and how it's built, and you know, if everything's being constructed properly.
right. Yeah, no, that's for sure. Or sometimes too, I know that a lot of contractors want to ask engineers for typical details, just so that they can, you know, in the event of crisis, you can try to utilize the typical detail. But a lot of times the situation is not always the same. So it is good to have a very good working relationship with your design, or just with everybody. You don't want to have an adversary. It just doesn't help anybody.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's I think it leads to like, what do you call it? Those times where it was like, or if the communication's not there, they'll the contractors or the builders or the subcontractors on site will do a solution that they think works before consulting the engineer. And then the RFI reads like, hey, we've already done this solution. Is it okay? And it's already built and installed. It's like, no. Call us before that happens. It's like they poured the concrete and that's what they try to fix. And then as the concrete's poured, it's like, no, that's, you guys shouldn't do it that way. And
Yeah,
then yeah.
that's the asking for forgiveness over permission.
Yeah, at your own risk. Oh man, don't blame us if we have to like tear everything out or whatnot.
Well, so how did you, was there ever a point in your time when you knew or you were thinking about, you know how you said you were doing geotechnical, structural, what kind of got you to say, yeah, this is what I want to do, this is the direction that I want to go?
I think it was when I took my uh I enjoyed the classes, right? So actually at first I didn't. The ones that we took the design classes I liked, all of the theory and all of like the physics, statics, dynamics courses that we had to take before we even got into the design classes. I did not enjoy those.
What did you not enjoy about them?
It was math, it was physics. And for me, I was okay at those, like I didn't like I wasn't not good at them. Like I'd get a passing grade and whatnot. Well, I even failed some math classes, but we can get into that later. But it was the way I worked is if it doesn't have a purpose, I'm not like really motivated to learn it. So when I was taking like a statics or dynamics class, I didn't know how important they were until I started taking my design courses. And that's when I got interested in statics and like dynamics. Once I took a design course in like concrete or steel, and then it was like, oh, that's why we needed to learn statics and dynamics, strength of materials.
Right.
And when I got my master's, before that, I brushed up on all those things because those were the fundamentals and those are the things that it was more enjoyable once I knew why are we learning math? To do this, to design structures and to design buildings. Like it was actually practical, and I still use it every day, those fundamentals of statics and dynamics. So for me, that's what really pushed me towards it, that I could see like, oh, all these things I'm learning, they're not just to learn. They're not just like a useless class. They were practical. And for me, practicality is one of the things that I'm drawn to. Like if it has a purpose and it has an impact, I think that's why I was drawn into that at the end of the day.
That's super interesting actually, because a lot of times those statics dynamics courses, right? Those are the ones that are supposed to, weed out the people. It's interesting to hear that your perspective, right? It's that you don't need to be in love with that in order to be a good engineer or to succeed in civil engineering, right? Those classes are, like you said, math and physics, right? But once you get into real engineering, that you can pull bits and pieces from it, but you don't need to be completely in love with those classes to be a decent engineer. So that's super interesting.
Yeah, they're just tools. They're part of your knowledge, and you just use them every day, and they're fun once you know them. But we're not like theoretical physicists that are deriving equations and coming up with new formulas. All of that stuff, the whole point of the code, just to simplify all of that theory, so we can use something essentially that's easy to use. And if we can plug and chug like numbers into an empirical or a formula that was like tested like out in the field and like through research, easy. Instead of one big derivation, it's just like one simple formula that you can find in the code, and that's how you can design stuff. So that's one of the things. Like we're not super theoretical in the consulting industry, at least.
In the consulting,
yeah, research is another thing.
Yeah, right.
What was that? Going back to the question, like, what do you think, or what would you like structural engineers to know, like, in terms of what you guys go through, or that you wish that the engineers would know?
I think urgency is probably the biggest one. But again, it's a two-way street. And maybe it's just for me, I always try to look at what we're doing first before we cast blame onto others. I don't know if that's typical, but I think that, yeah, just being a team player, understanding that there are there are construction tolerances, there's just things that happen in the field that just happen. Like the most diligent contractor out there will still make mistakes because you have a crew of hundreds of people out there. One big one is like when you have a post-tension deck, not every person that's installing, electrician, framer, they don't understand what it means to break a PT cable. Yep. They don't know, so they're just going. There was one where the plumber was trying to chip out a hole for his line, and he exposed banded cables. I think there were 8 banded cables that he exposed by chipping, and he just saw the blue and just went right next to it, and it was like, dude, you should have just stopped, right? But that kind of thing just shows that not everybody you can talk about it in meetings, you can talk about it till you're blue in the face, but to control hundreds of people is just it's tough, right? So just having that understanding, sometimes it's like, oh, you broke another one, right? It's like sure, I mean, we could put a news blast out, we could every local news station whatever, and tell everybody, but you're not going to be able to get everybody on board. And then just the urgency factor and knowing, hey, if something's hot, we really need it, we really need an answer. But I completely understand it too, if the contractor consistently puts you in that situation. And maybe that's for the engineer too, right, to say, hey, like, what do you guys need help with, or what are you guys doing, right? Like,
come on, guys.
Right, like, then you have to put your foot down, right, and say, and maybe it's a conversation with, because a lot of times you guys are hired by the developer or the owner of the project, right? So just having a conversation with the owner saying, hey, these guys keep putting us under the gun, and they say, we're trying, but it's not fair to you guys. So it's like I said, it's always a two-way street.
And, with the with the PT cables, I mean, you're right. It's to the if someone hasn't even seen or known what PT cables are, it's not obvious. They're covered. They don't look like steel. Like if you see a piece of rebar, you're probably like, okay, don't cut that. But if you don't have no idea what the PT tendons are, you don't know that they're under like tens and thousands of pounds under stress, and if you cut it, it could like blow up the slab. There was one picture where it was like a field photo, and there were like, it was on top of a post tension slab, and it had like a big red sign that says, don't cut the PT tendons, or don't drill into this existing slab. And then you can see like that big giant hole that the contractor or the subcontractor like post installed. It was like, no, it says right there, don't drill through
right there. and sometimes, but then you can see, right, like how these guys are under stress. A lot of these guys are told to do one thing and they do it. And it's very tough to have that whole big picture mentality when you have all these different moving parts on a job. So that's the key.
And then I think it's like the stress. I can see why some would just cut through, I don't know, wood studs, and I don't know, like the trades when they need to get their equipment in there, their mechanical units in there. There's a wood stud in the way. Let's get it out of the way.
Get it out of the way. I need to get from here to there. This is in my way. Facing?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, you have so many of them in the wall. Why do you, what's one more? Oh, that's one thing. I don't know. Have you heard that a lot? It's like, oh, what's one bar? What's one whatever? You have so many of this in here. Like, I don't need this. All this trim. Oh, I guess that's one thing. Going back to construction tolerances. I don't know how much say you guys have on these kinds of things, but just not designing to perfection, essentially, where we would need to execute things properly. a lot of times that actually goes more into the architectural sides of things. But if in your design you see, hey, this architect is trying to flush out all these finished materials with exposed concrete elements, it's like, nah, never gonna happen, right? You can't pour concrete the same way you can frame a wall. But and then just understanding the buildability of things. But it's tough, right? It's like, it took me 6 years of being out there with them every day to kind of get an idea of what you can do, what you can't do, what's easy, what's hard, what solutions you can have. So you guys make job site visits, once in a while, but not nearly the same amount. And I still run into things, right? So it's tough. It's tough to know what you can and can't do. But when everyone's trying together, that's what really makes it happen.
Yeah, it's I think with the industry, it's a lot. There's just so much stuff to learn. That's why we have all these specialties and different trades. We're just relying on everyone to, hopefully we can see like the lessons learned. I like to think of RFIs as lessons learned, and that's where we get a lot of I guess for new engineers, that's where you'll learn a lot of construction lessons on like what you mentioned, even like construction tolerances. It was like, no, you can't specify like dig your foundation like 2 and 6.5 inches. It's like, dude, the shovels don't work that way. Like they got like big rigs, and like that perfection part. I think that's like a common new engineer mistake. And well, even with construction tolerances, like with steel, you can try to erect a steel structure, but even in the steel codes, there's steel tolerances. So if you're trying to put up like a super flush, I don't know, cold form steel wall, you got to expect that there's going to be some tolerances that it's not going to be like that out in the field. And those things are, you just have to be aware of. Like, I think either the architect and the engineers catch it, or the subcontractors will catch it when they're trying to build it. It was like, nope,
Yeah,
isn't gonna work.
Yeah, and that's and that's the more typical way, right? The better you are at being a contractor, the better you are at being an engineer. You can get ahead of it on the front end, but a lot of times you can't catch everything, and then you end up being there in the field like, whoa, can't do that.
Nope.
Yeah, and that's when you start making the calls to the engineer. Hey, fix this. What am I gonna do here? And then that's where the higher stress, I guess, comes into play. But
yeah, it's all cool. Part of it.
Yeah. What is your tips on getting a job?
Getting a job in the structural engineering field, at least in the US for sure, try to get as many internships as you can, because not only is that going to solidify whether you want to work in the industry or not, but it builds up your experience, because that way you can get a better job, hopefully when you graduate, like an actual full-time job. Finding those is tough for me. Getting internships, I sent out a lot of resumes, didn't land any. My resume sucked like when I was a student, and that's how I got involved in, I tried to build up my experience. I didn't have experience, so I tried to get some, joining like ASCE and doing like engineering competitions, getting involved in those engineering clubs. Like I think I was part of I was like an officer at CalGeo, joined their engineering competitions for the GeoWall competition. We did a seismic analysis on another project as well for like a wood balsa wood structure, and we put it on a shake table. Engineering projects like that, just to build up my resume, but it did more. It actually built up, group, working with a group, which is completely transferable once you get into the real world. So not only does it build up your communication skills, your teamwork skills, but it also builds your resumes. And so once I got some of those things on my resume, that's when I started getting, callbacks from my first internships. That's how I got my first internships. And doing what other people aren't doing. Like it's what the common thing is to go on the internet, go on monster.com or indeed.com and just Google and then just send out your resume. Everyone's seeing those resume. You're competing with like 10,000 people on those. Like even if you are like one of the best, 10,000 people versus, and they can only pick one. Like I don't care how good you are, the chances are low that you're getting that position.
But the commercials make it look so easy.
I know, right?
I just saw the one the other day, and I was like, I don't know if anybody that's gotten a job off of Indeed, but this lady got it in the matter of minutes.
That's that 0.1% apparently, or that 1%, and it works. Like try it. I definitely do those. You never know. Yeah. But for me, what worked out the best was going to local firms, small firms that don't even have advertisements. Like I would just Google like small structural engineering firms near me, and you can just get in contact with the owner directly instead of trying to go through some whole system. You would just email the owner and just tell them, hey, I know you don't have a position open, but if you need help, like I can intern for you. And that actually was a pretty good success rate. I got multiple interviews from that and got an internship from that. So, start off small, like go where everyone else isn't going. And yeah.
What do you mean by your resume wasn't strong? What was not strong about your resume?
You just look like everybody else in engineering school. It's like, yeah, you took statics, concrete, steel. So what? Like everybody in your class has done that. What separates you? What makes you unique? So doing things that take more work, but that show that you're serious about your profession and you can work with people and stuff that looks good on your resume. I think that's something that could set you apart from the typical group of people, because that's what employers look for. Like an engineer that's good technically is everywhere. So they're easily replaceable. You need someone that knows those classes. Just go to any engineering school and you can find them. But if you're looking for an engineer that could be a potential leader in your firm, or maybe is like really smart and can work with people and can maybe make the clients happy, or maybe even get clients in the future, that's for an engineer, that's tough. Like you find those qualities in an engineer and they're technical, those are the ones that are going to be hard to replace. If you need someone technical, easy, just go to any engineering school. So that's what I mean by like making your resume stand out.
No, that's super. I'm with you on the going smaller, especially if you're not finding a lot of success. I think sometimes people try to get caught up, and even, I don't know if you like your friends are getting all these jobs at all these big companies, things like that. If you really want it, you can go smaller and work your way up, because a lot of times I think too nowadays, even the bigger companies are starting to realize that GPA doesn't mean as much as it used to, especially in construction. But the bigger companies will look specifically at that, because when they first see the applicant fresh out of school, because that's all they have to judge them on. But even construction, I think construction even more so. The 4.0 engineering students usually don't pan out well in construction, because construction has a lot of nuances that 4.0 students can't really deal with. Like how does a 4.0 student typically handle a guy that accidentally flushes his shirt sleeve down the temporary toilet, and now you have to like fix the line going up the entire tower, right? That's not a 4.0 student. They don't have the tools to deal with, or not all of them, but a lot of times, right? The ones that have only studied on their own and it's just not conducive typically to what construction ends up being. So if you have a lower GPA, yeah, you might not be in the bigger companies at first, but once you get your first few years of experience somewhere at any company, that'll mean way more to any bigger company later on than if you're fresh out of school. So it's a very good tip, I think, to not focus on only, I guess, the bigger companies, and try to get your experience in anywhere that you can. And once you get your foot in the door, it's pretty easy from there, I would
Is that
say.
what it's like in construction engineering? So I imagine with the construction engineering, you would go into, is it civil engineering or is there a construction engineering major or?
Yeah, so if you're going to do construction engineering specifically, which I would consider like maybe more like formwork design, or yeah, just anything that you need for the job. Maybe you could even be for cranes and picking and rigging, things like that. Then yeah, you would probably need the civil engineering degree background. If you want to work for a general contractor like I do, you could get civil, you could get construction management, you could get, I mean, we have someone that is a master's in teaching that is working for us as a project engineer right now. So, but it's all about, but all the people that are there, they have the attitude to do the job, which is why I tell people is that if you didn't do super well in school, it's fine. Well, not fine, but it's, you know, it's not the end of the world. You can, if you have the right attitude, if you have the right work ethic, if you have the right mindset going into it, I mean, construction is all effort, and you learn everything on the job. I mean, everything that I know now
Is that
basically
what
came from experience.
you think general contractors in general look for if they're recruiting like a construction engineer? Is like how important are the grades, or is it just more about attitude and whatnot?
The bigger companies, I think, will focus more on the grades. The smaller companies, I think, focus more on the personality and the how do they think this person is going to fit within the team. Because it is very important, especially on a smaller company. You only have so many people to run jobs, so one bad egg in the smaller group of people will affect the company more than one bad. I mean, you can have bad eggs in a bigger company that stay forever, because you can just kind of fly under the radar. But it's, yeah, I think they're realizing now that they need more people geared for the industry than they need more people that look good on paper. So I'm starting to see more of that in the hiring process. So I don't know how long it's going to take to completely get away from it, because those companies are all about, the bigger companies are all about managing their risk, right? So if you're good on paper statistically, that's supposed to be what manages the risk. But once you prove yourself, once you prove yourself anywhere, then I've seen people kind of just go in, because that's what you're proving at that point. So that's all they're looking for.
Yeah, you have a good reputation on paper, but then I think when it comes down to it, they put you out in the field with a group of people.
Yes.
How does that look?
Yeah, it's a completely different ball game. I mean, you can't. Yeah, it's that's why you can get a lot of clarity on, like what Matt said. You can get a lot of clarity on what you want to do and getting yourself in the door through internships. So, like for me, I would have been probably doing what Matt's doing if I didn't do my construction internship. That completely changed my entire career trajectory, and I'm super happy with that decision. But everything in my life told me, you know, grade school, you know, be good in the classroom, and that kind of just funneled me into that. And then, but I can build stuff. I can do, you know, that internship taught me what else I could do. And that fit my lifestyle and what I wanted more, to be more outside, to be more hands-on, be part of the build rather than being what we may consider behind the scenes, right? Of doing the design work and doing all the calculations and things like that.
Yeah. What was it about? So what was it about? You mentioned you had your internships, and then that ultimately led you to construction engineering. Like, how was that like? Could you explain that? Like, you were thinking about going into civil, and then you get into construction, then you're like, screw civil, I'm going to this. Like, could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I loved every day about going to my job during that internship. I think it was, Hawaii construction is pretty big, so it seemed natural to me to just kind of try to do it first. and see what I could get, because there's not too many huge structural engineering firms in Hawaii. So if I were to go to a big one, it would be probably back in the mainland where I went to school. So I wanted to be home. So I said, okay, just do this job, and just being there, being with the workers, working things out with the crew. And I was with a superintendent that had a little bit of that attitude of like, yeah, these designers, they don't know, they don't come out here, we never see them. So I thought in my mind, like, yeah, I don't want to be that guy, right? I want to be that lame designer. But he was actually very smart in the sense that he said, if I wanted to go into design, he said, I would be a substantially better designer if I started in construction. He said, you can always go back. He said, but you'll go back with some real good knowledge about what works and what doesn't work. So I said, okay, that kind of made sense to me. I said, but now looking at it, it's like I would never go back, because I don't have the mental capacity to go get back into that mode of what designers do. But yeah, I was there. I had my own little crew. I ran we had precast panels that had to sit on top of rebar and had grout tubes in there. So I needed to, I worked with my crew on how to do it. We had to figure out how to work the pump, what mixes we needed to do. And the foreman only gave 2 guys at the time. And so we had the pump at the bottom and to pump either the grout to shoot up at the top, right? And that's how we knew that the whole tube was filled in the panel. Being there is going to be fine, right? On paper, it's like, yeah, this should work. So we pour the grout in the pump, it's going, and then all of a sudden the grout just shoots out of the top tube like 20 feet away, and then we don't know how to stop it. And then we only had the one guy at the bottom and the one guy at the pump mixing. So then, how do you plug the top with only one other guy? So then I had to jump in, right? So I had the thing, and at the end of the day, the guy at the bottom had grout all over his hard hat, right? But when we were there, we just felt that bond as a crew together, right? Like, okay, and we made improvements. We added another guy. We looked at our budgets, all those kinds of things, and that I thought was really fun. Just okay, here's what we need to do on paper. How do we actually get there? And that's what I think really drew me in. And then, yeah, when the building's there, you feel like you built that building. And that, I believed at the time, that meant more than I drew the building or I designed the beam or I, did whatever. That's what did it for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's at home, if you do like a DIY project, like you make your own tabletop or whatnot, like that feels really good. It was like your own 2 hands, and you put the the blood, sweat, and tears into it. And as you're going through that, if you're doing it with a team of people you like and respect, I think that's a big thing about construction. And when people are deciding like which 2 fields that they want to do, I think that could be a big draw for someone that wants to be out there with people and likes maybe more the DIY handset or skill set of doing things like that. I think I definitely get that. I know for me, it's I like being out in the field, but I don't like being out in the field all the time. And for me, I'm an introvert, like naturally. So I like being in the office. I like, I recharge by like being alone and not being around people all the time. Like if I go to conventions and stuff like that, like, yeah, I'll talk to people and do it, but it like drains me. So like the less people I'm around, the more energized I am.
Yeah.
So it's like knowing yourself and your personality and
that's
what
true,
type of work you do. But I
Yeah.
can definitely see that. Like, I'm sure that you guys probably get more satisfaction than us because you guys are actually seeing it built like day by day, seeing it gradually built versus the engineer or the architect that may just see photos of it from every couple of weeks or so.
But either way, it's still rewarding, I'm sure. I mean, you're a part of something that stand for a while, right? And you can't you can't build a building with only the contractor. As much as we'd like to believe it, that we don't need any of these consultants. If you just told us what to do, we could just do it, right? But no, we can't. So it takes the team.
And I like your point about engineers getting a construction internship. I wish I would have gotten one. Like if I was to do it over again, I would have like worked in a construction internship. And then a structural firm, because like you said, you learn so much when you're actually out in the field.
Mhm.
And for me, it was a learning curve. If you've never been in on a construction site or even see how things get built, it's a longer learning curve, because that'll come in as an RFI if you're helping design something, and then you'll learn your lessons, but you might have learned them a lot better if you were out in the field and knowing how things are constructed. And it blows my mind that engineers are designing things, like they teach us, like we're designing things that we don't know that are how they're built, like when we're in school. Like they're teaching us how to design
Yeah,
timber.
super true.
They're teaching us how to design like masonry and concrete. But if you ask like a typical civil engineering student, they're not going to know how this stuff is constructed. Like I learned a lot of it from talking to, my senior engineers, and that's experience. So it's like, you can learn so much if you're out in the field. So it still blows my mind that we don't have like a construction class like as part of our curriculum, because it doesn't make sense.
I think too, a lot of times people have the tendency to want, I don't know if you see the same thing in your work, but the tendency to want to climb really, really quickly. And I think you do yourself a disservice if you don't take the time to gain this experience, because it's so different working in the industry than it is learning the industry in college. So it's not like you can study all you want, but I feel like the only thing that you can do is work more to accelerate yourself. It's very tough to just innately improve, right? And just, kind of vocalize yourself, because usually the people that self-promote and really try to climb the ladder, as you skip the steps, you skip pretty important experience. And so I just say be patient with everything, and put in the time, and that's the best way for you to really get your growth to the next level. I don't know if you feel the same way about your industry.
Yeah, it's it's like corporate, like ladders and stuff like that. It's some of the best advice I've gotten is, if you're at least if you're an engineer in structural engineering, or I think even in civil engineering in general, your first 5 to 10 years, become an expert, like technically, like try to learn as much as you can about the technical things in your field. For us, it's like different materials, how things are constructed, how to design things, and how to read the codes and stuff like that. And that should be your main focus, I think, because later on, if you're good at that, it's going to earn you the respect of like the people that you're eventually going to lead or help guide or help manage, because you kind of fall into that trap of like the ignorant leader that kind of just gets promoted but doesn't know what's going on, or doesn't know what the team's going through. Like he can't help the team because he doesn't know what the team's going through or how to solve their problems.
Right.
But if you do have all that technical knowledge, then I think that's what's kind of unique about, or more unique about engineering, is that you need to know what you're doing, or else you can't even help your team or help them succeed.
Yeah, that's super true. Yeah.
But also,
being a cheerleader can only help you and get you so far.
Yeah, there's only so many times you can tell your team, get it done. And like, I don't care what happens, just get it done. It's like, well, they need help. But I say, especially with like newer engineers too, it's focus on technical, but whenever you got like time, read about, like, you got to understand all the communication skills that you need to to be in that position. So that means like improving your communication skills, maybe taking a public speaking class, get better at writing emails, better and shorter to make your points clear. Because if you are in those leadership positions, you're going to have to be doing those things too, like communicating with the contractor, owner, clients. It's you don't just want to all of a sudden be put into those positions and you don't know how to do those.
Right.
It's you got to be aware of those things. So focus on technical, but hey, get out there and go talk to people, improve your communication skills.
Yeah. Yeah. So what about money? Talk about what people can expect getting into the industry. What do you see in your realm?
With the way it relates to construction engineering, this is kind of funny. So it's like I'm a proponent of engineers. If you're a student, getting a construction engineering job because you're out in the field, right? And then if you do that, and then you want to get into engineering, you're gonna be like, what the hell? Why are they paying me so low? It's like I'm staying in construction.
that is
So that
is true.
I think in general, construction engineering does pay more, and especially with those big construction firms, I'm sure the salary goes up there. And but like structural engineering isn't a slouch either in terms of like salary. You look up surveys, at least in the US, probably right now, an entry level structural engineer is probably around 70K. So it's not like software engineering where you're making like, I don't know, 100 or plus starting out or whatnot.
Yeah,
but
sure.
You're not going to be like dirt poor. Like for me, it's the way I live my life and the way I spend. Like I live a comfortable life. Like I am not like worrying how I'm going to pay my rent next month or whatnot. So for me, it's a comfortable salary, and it's not a dead end in terms of like it leads to stuff. I think if you get into structural engineering and for whatever reason you don't like it, there's other ways you can use that degree and your experience. I know a lot of engineers that do go into construction because it pays more. Or they want to go into the city, work for the city, maybe plan checking and whatnot. So I think the consulting side, you may hear about like complaints about like us not getting paid a lot. I think that's a valid point. I think for all of the things that we do, a lot of people don't see it, like all the codes that we have to read and interpret and the testing that we go through. People won't appreciate it. And that's our fault too, as an industry. We don't promote ourselves in the best way. You only hear
Why
about
do you
us.
think that is?
We don't want exposure. Like, and when we do want exposure, it's more of like a look at all the cool stuff that I built, and I'm better than everybody else, and that XYZ. Like these guys don't know anything.
Right.
And I think I don't think that's the way we should promote ourselves.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think the only time you'll hear about us is when like a building falls down. Like
True.
So
True.
all the public knows is like,
true.
what did the engineers do? Like, can't they design a building right?
True. Yeah.
So it's you'll hear about us about like that 0.1% of when maybe we failed our duties as a structural engineer. But at least in the US, what about like those 99.9% of all those successful buildings that are standing up?
Yeah.
It's like those things are successful, but you won't hear about it because I think as engineers, the default personality is probably introverts, and we don't want that exposure. So
that's super true. Yeah, no, I agree with that.
We complain instead.
Yeah, we complain internally, and then,
we complain instead.
Nothing happens.
Like, oh, these guys don't appreciate us. Like that's all we can do. We don't want to do like the extra work of like going out there and sharing our stuff on social media, man. Like that's one of the reasons I started YouTube is a lot of us don't want to do it. It was like, we know how to promote ourselves, but we don't want to do it. Promote our industry. So that was definitely one of the reasons, but kind of went off on a tangent, but salary wise,
No,
for
no,
those
no.
of you that are wondering, 70K probably starting in the US, and maybe 5 or 6 years down, you'll probably reach that 100K mark, at least in the West Coast, where the cost of living is a little higher. And then it'll go up from there if you become like a principal or an associate principal in your firm. That's for private consulting, by the way. Yeah, not government or yeah.
What do you guess the cut down is to go public?
What do you mean by cut down?
Or like, well, I'm assuming it's less to work government.
Oh, government?
Yeah.
No, I think government's a good job.
Oh, really?
From my experience and the people that I've talked to,
Mm-hmm.
it depends on what you want. Because
Mm-hmm.
like when most people become or want to become structural engineers, they're thinking of consulting, designing buildings, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But if you get from my knowledge and from the people that I've talked to that are working in government, like I get the impression that it's less technically challenging. Like you're not designing for the most part. There are
Mm-hmm.
some where I think you do get to design, but for the most part, if you're like a plan checker, you're not designing buildings. You are like checking the design of others.
Mm.
And so probably less stress and less deadlines, because like I think the cities they're kind of in the gatekeeper position. If we can't get approval from the city, our projects don't work. So you're kind of in that higher up position if you're like a government plan checker.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm assuming that's less hours, but even the benefits and the salary is short term, it's a lot better. You get better benefits and better salary. So that is a tempting option, or that's an option that some engineers that I've seen that don't want to work in consulting anymore, they go and use their structural engineering skills for the government, and they probably get paid more and have really good benefits, but more with the cons of less technical work, less design work, and probably more political as well. It's government, so you got to go through a lot of approvals and checks and balances and things like that.
So what kind of hours do you work for your $70,000 starting salary? What can they expect?
For me, it depends on your firm. It's not uncommon to work overtime if you're just starting out. At least this is my experience, because I know some people in the industry have gotten other experiences, but for me, I was so eager to learn that I would want to work, like overtime. Like it was for me, when I take on a project, I like to take ownership of that project and I want to do like a really good job on it. So for me, I would work overtime because I didn't know anything when I was first starting out. And yeah, even on my free time, like I'd work on a project because I was really interested on how to learn it. And even like my managers telling me like, dude, go home, like I appreciated that. They weren't making me like stay overtime, and they'd help me out. So I'd work overtime the first couple of years, but a lot of it was voluntary. Like no one was really making me do it. But it's not uncommon. I've heard plenty of stories where firms may work you overtime. Maybe they're understaffed or whatnot, and it just needs to happen, and everyone needs to work maybe like 50 hours. But for me, past couple of years, it's been pretty balanceable in terms of work life. Like it's times I'll work 40 hours a week, but then obviously when deadlines come in, it's like up and down. Like sometimes it'll be okay, but then we got a deadline. We got to do what we got to do to get those deadlines in. Kind of like school. So when you have a big deadline, you'll put in the hours to get it done. So for me, it's been up and down, but it's been sustainable. I think for me, it's just balancing all this other extra stuff, especially like studying and whatnot for licensing exams. That always sucks, but I'll find a way to get through it. And Yeah, so there's different experiences, but from if you go into different sectors, maybe more specialty structural engineering, maybe for fabricators or the government, I've heard that those are more schedule lenient. So yeah, don't be surprised if you work overtime, but hopefully you're not being worked to death. If you are, there's firms that don't do that. Like it's different. It depends on your firm.
Yeah, no, that is pretty true. Yeah.
What's the salary and like the work experience like for construction engineering?
So here in Hawaii, and Hawaii typically pays a little bit higher. Construction is, unless this is just my own two companies that I worked for, it seems to follow cost of living pretty closely. So you'll get paid, you'll get paid a little bit more on the West Coast, and you might have a little bit of an adjustment if you're more towards the middle of the U.S. But for here in Hawaii, a starting engineer will probably be in the mid to high 70s, maybe 80s, with the potential up to $100,000 starting, depending on the company. Construction is not the place to be if you just want to make money and you don't like your work, because you do have to work a lot, especially if you want to progress. Like I said, everything is experience-based. You're going to have to put in the hours. It's a higher stress industry. I think that's why they tend to try to pay a little bit more. The first job that I was on was a $300 million high rise, and that was a tough job. Most of us were working 7 days a week towards the end, and maybe 10-hour days on the weekends, 12 to 14, 16-hour days during the weekdays towards the end of that job. But I loved it. Kind of similar to what Matt said. It was, I really wanted to learn. I wanted to be a sponge. I wanted to insert myself into as many places that I could. Probably did a lot more, and it did me a service for sure. Because usually on a big job, you get pigeonholed into one thing. So you'll be the engineer in charge of concrete only, or you'll be the engineer in charge of, the exterior envelope. And you won't get to see how everything comes together, which is the key to construction. But for me, I was in concrete, I did rebar, and then I just jumped in wherever they needed help, whether it was the amenity deck, whether it was the civil work down below, whether it was the roof, because I wanted it. And that's why, maybe some people would say that I, worked too much or did, but that's really what I wanted to spend my time on at the time. It's doing those. So I've had jobs where I've worked maybe, I haven't really worked less than 50 a week, usually, typically. But I don't feel it. It's always, we start at 6:30, 7 o'clock, and usually it just ends up being like 4:30, 5 o'clock, and then I'm like, I still have all this stuff to do that I didn't achieve, because there's just so much going on in construction. There's so many things to do, so it never really feels like I'm being overworked, but it is kind of the nature of the business. I think we're trying to work away from the entire work life. Yeah. So a little bit of technical
technical difficulties.
It depends on, I don't know what this is going to end up looking like, but a little bit of a cutoff here. So it's fine. We're connecting from across an ocean. So the fact that we're even doing this is incredible when you really think about it. But I think kind of left off talking about the work hours, talked about a little bit of the salaries involved. I don't really know if there's a big difference in like the quality of your life depending on each company that you go for, because construction in itself, just the nature of the industry, kind of causes you to work a little bit more than normal. So when you're at a small job, you might be more working on multiple jobs. So sometimes people think that if you work, instead of a general contractor, you can work for a subcontractor. Then it's like, oh, good, I can only focus on drywall, or I can only focus on concrete. But what ends up happening is that in order for those companies to stay afloat, they need to work on multiple jobs. So you're not just focused on one project. You're doing concrete or you're doing drywall or glass for 3 or 4 different jobs. So it's still kind of the same thing for that. So it pays you a decent living, but you do have to put in the time. You do have to put in the effort. I think this generation of people coming in, I feel like we're putting more of an emphasis on the work-life balance aspect of it. But I think it just goes for anything that you try to do, anything that you really love or want to get better at. You have to put in the time. And I've always believed the best time to do it is in your 20s, when you really don't have that, or typically you don't really have that many commitments, things to do. You might as well just work on your own skills. And that's, to me, the best way to accelerate your growth.
Yeah, I think from what you said, and I think possibly even for both industries is yeah, you'll probably work overtime. But I think like the dirty secret is like when we do, hopefully we love it. Like we want to do that because we like the work that we're doing. And yeah, because for me, it's when I was first starting out, that's what I did. Now I know a lot more, and I can work less because I know what I'm doing. It's like so things like that.
Sure.
But then it even comes back to training and mentoring the next generation of engineers. And if you get success from that, or if you like doing that as well, I think it's all part of the growth. But you have to know yourself and your situation, like you're implying. Like you probably have time when you're younger to work that much, but then as you get older, maybe you get a family, things can change, and you have to reflect on that too. As you're getting further in whatever career you're doing, you kind of have to always see what the priority is, and it's different for everybody.
No, for sure. And I think having that self-awareness is super important. I mean, just in general, I think and it really will come out when you're working. You don't want to be miserable. Like the money is never worth it, really. I mean, you can like even to it's maybe tens of thousands that you might be making more than if you were to work something else, right? But it's at the end of the day, you want to know for yourself what you really how you're wired and what you really want to do. So
yeah, if you're working 100 hours a week and you hate your job, leave.
Yeah.
Like, but
yeah, no, it's not sustainable.
The fulfillment from it, then that's up to you.
Yeah. And the thing is too, I think it's kind of weird because you need to have that self-awareness, but you need to balance it too with not over-analyzing the situation and kind of just jumping in. I don't know how you feel, but I still feel like if I really wanted to, I don't, but like if I really wanted to, I could change careers and it'd be fine. Like you have time. You don't need to have everything figured out from day one. You have the opportunity to kind of move back and forth, but until you pick something, right, you'll never get any clarity. So
yeah, and I think what's fortunate about our careers, structural and construction, a lot of the skills are transferable to other career paths. You're not locked into one. You can use those same skills. I'm sure for construction engineering, you can get into a lot of other different careers if you wanted to, just because I think those skills are just so transferable.
Yeah, no, for sure. So what would you say? I know you have your day in the life video. That's, I think, your most viewed video,
yeah, I think so. Those were pretty popular. I didn't know people wanted to know what a day in the life was, but apparently they do.
yeah. So if you guys haven't watched it, because even for me, mine is that's my most viewed video as well. Not nearly the amount of views that yours has, but it seems like people want to know. So maybe you can just, for those who haven't ever watched the video, maybe just kind of take us through your day and what it feels like, what you do.
Yeah, sure. A typical structural engineering consulting firm where you're designing buildings. It's it's an office job for the most part. So most of my days are in the office. Maybe a couple times a month, we'll go out onto the site and do our structural observations. But for the most part, we are in the office. And if you're a younger engineer, you'll probably be helping out on different parts of the construction process, whether it's preliminary or schematic or design development part of the design, where you're using calculations, designing wood beam sizes, designing structural members for the most part, whether that's through hand calcs or software. And a lot, if you're a younger engineer, you'll end up doing that. You'll do a lot of design work, but you'll also end up working in the construction support, construction administration phases where buildings are being constructed. And that's where you get your RFIs, shop drawings, submittals. And those are probably going to be the two main things you'll be doing as a younger engineer just starting out. A lot of design and a lot of construction support, which I love. Though for me, like designing is like the best part about it. So I still like designing the design process. Once you get more experience, you'll start managing your own projects. And this is more of what my day looks like is a good amount of phone calls and the coordination with the contractor, with the architect. That's always crucial. I think that becomes a lot more prevalent once you're in charge of a project. You're keeping track of all the changes that are happening. You're providing valuable input to the architect and hopefully the contractor as well on what direction we want to go with the structure and whatnot. So a lot of phone calls and meetings. And also there's going to be a lot of reading through emails. There's so many emails once you get involved in different projects that are going around, and keeping track of those is a job in and of itself as well. Besides that, another part of my day is coordinating with other engineers, making sure that we're getting the help that we need from either I'm doing it or I have engineers helping me out on projects so we can get all the work done, and helping keep track of all the deadlines that are out there. And yeah, and there's some, depending, sometimes we'll get like proposals and items like that where we're bidding on projects, or maybe we have a meeting with a potential client that we're going to, and we'll do like a presentation and whatnot for like our solution for that building. So things like that, once you get a couple of years in and you're doing more of the project management side of things. But I still do some design work, but I have a lot more help now. So it's less design, more obviously management, but you're using your skills and your experience, your technical expertise to take a look at the bigger picture and making sure that the client's taken care of, the team's on the right path structurally, and that the engineers are getting the help that they need and the support that they need, basically they can get into management if that's what they want as well. But yeah, that's like, it's a lot of kind of gets boring, I guess, if you're talking about it from like a project management aspect of it, but it's like an office job. But
Yeah.
again, for me, that's what I like. I like being indoors, and I don't mind getting on calls, but I love the structural engineering aspects of it, even if it's from a bigger perspective where I'm doing less design work, but it's making those bigger decisions on like maybe what structural systems that we need. So using my expertise as well, I like using all that. So that's why some people may find that boring, but it's something that I still love doing.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like you do similar things every day, or do you think that it's always changing, or what is your?
It's always changing. We always get, every project is different. Like, even if it's like the same project or a similar project, there's always going to be some unique problem, whether it comes out during the design or whether it comes out even in the construction process. There's always some unique problem. Maybe they misplaced something. We got to come up with a unique solution that satisfies the architectural look, what they have out in the field. And what's most economical. So basically, if that's the problem that we solve, I love the problem solving aspect of it.
Hmm.
It's really using your creativity, your technical skills to find the best solution. And um, yeah, that's what I like. Problem solving, man.
That's actually a very, very good point. I'm glad you brought that up. Is that for we had a job that I did. My portion of the job was the second phase of a prior project where we literally built the exact same building 3 more times. But we had a different crew, we had a different superintendent, a different team, and a little bit different site conditions. And that in itself turned it upside down. But from the outside looking in, it's like you're the same company, you're the same, it's the same client, it's the same drawings even for the most part. How could it be difficult, right? But it does. It ends up, even if you're doing the same thing, it can be different. Every job, one of my managers, he makes this joke, is that every job is a prototype in construction. It's like even you can take little things here and there from different jobs, but it's always different. And that's what I like about construction too. And I don't know if you guys switch teams and things like that as well, but it always seems to have that continuous fresh start. You're never doing the same thing for 30 years or 10 years, right? It's like few year projects at a time that, maybe you have a bad job and you can, just go to and have a different team on the next one, right? And you always have that continuous flow of change and hopefully improvement, right? Throughout your career.
Yeah, I think that's why it's tough too, to automate, or I guess
Yes.
the construction AEC industry. It's hard to automate things because
Yes.
there's just so many moving pieces and so much to learn, and different people and the way things are managed and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, every project's different. And I think that's bad in terms of like productivity. Like if we were able to, like, I don't know, Amazon everything and makes everything like super automated,
Yeah.
that'd be really productive. It'd be really boring.
Yeah. Yeah.
But maybe we'll eventually get there. I guess. Hopefully not in my lifetime, but I think that's what's part of it that makes it interesting. Like those
Right.
different problems and those different factors. I was curious about if someone got into construction engineering, what their day is like. I know you got a video on that, but could you summarize that for people that haven't watched it?
Yeah. So for us, a lot of times the day is structured around when people are working. So the workforce, the field personnel here in Hawaii, they start at 7 and they end at 3:30. Sometimes working later than that. So you're kind of structure your day around that. So the way I suggest starting engineers is to spend your time in the field between that 7 to 3:30 period, because that's where you're going to learn the most. You're going to be in with the problem outside there with all the workers. They can share their issues with you or even share their stories. And that's, to me, how you're going to get the most learning. Then from 3:30 on is when you start to do your paperwork, whether it's RFIs, submittals, answering emails, things like that. If you have concrete pours during the day, a lot of times, me and the guy who's doing the concrete on this job, we make jokes that like you just don't eat. You just because it's not worth the time and effort and the stress to be away from the pour, because you want to make sure that you order the right amount of concrete, finish it out properly. And we know that once we step away, especially if you're in a high rise where you're on the 20th floor, once you step away, you don't want to have to go back up to, help with an issue or
go all the way up there.
So it's like, we're just going to park ourselves up here. This is just part of it. And it takes a certain kind of person to be willing to do that. So when a lot of times, if you're in the structure part of the build, you will be starting earlier and ending later, and it's usually higher stress. But yeah, so usually I'll start around, sometimes we even have meetings at 6:30, so you would be there by 6, and then maybe 5:30, 6, 7 o'clock, maybe 8. But there are jobs too where you will start at 7 and you'll end at 4, 5 o'clock. So it really depends. The worst ones are, to me, the night shift ones, where you're doing a lot of road work or, swing shifts, double shifts, things like that. But it's just the nature of the business. So hopefully you get dealt a good hand on your first job. But to me, it's spend a lot of time outside, dealing with issues, dealing with the people outside. And that to me will help you moving forward, because there's nothing like seeing it and being a part of the problem in the field. That's the way you're going to learn the most.
Is that what type of task? Is it like you're supervising, or are you helping? You're not actually helping them construct, right? Are you doing more of the engineering tasks, supervision?
It depends. Your intent is always to go out there and help coordinate. But there are times when things happen, and for me, I was never afraid to, pick up a hammer or do something, right, just to help. But a lot of times too, you have to balance that, right? If you have a good relationship with the crew, and you kind of want to do like the task that takes the least amount of brain power, because you're actually likely the worst laborer out there as being an engineer. So you don't want to get in the way, but sometimes to get that rapport with the crew, to know that you're not just this office guy that's there to, kind of oversee them, right? You're part of their team. So there are times where I had to dig holes, or there was something that really needed to get done, or tie some rebar or something like that. Don't cancel me, labor unions, but there is something where you just, the concrete's coming, maybe they're short some guys, things like that. But just kind of jumping in and helping. But for the most part, your job is to just be out there. And when you first start out, you'll be QCing. So like if you're the structural QC person, you're checking PT heights, making sure they have the right amount of cables in there. They're in the right locations. They don't need to have extra trim bars for sweeps. And kind of working with the contractors, the special inspector, and the consultants, making sure that whatever we put in place is correct. And that's a lot of times where you have to deal with conflict management, where the drawings say one thing and you get there and you can't do it. And that's where it gets really fun to me, right? To solve the problem, talk to people, and work it out and get it done. Make sure you stay on schedule, stay on budget.
That's how an RFI gets created. Like
that is how an RFI gets created.
Engineers out in the field, like, hey, this isn't working. Let's go write an RFI.
Yeah, and I guess we never said this, but RFI stands for Request for Information. So it's something that you write to ask basically a question. You need clarity on something, or you need to confirm that something needs to be done a certain way. Because again, as the contractor, we're not the designers. We can't make the calls. We're not the ones that put our stamp on this building. So the people that do have that liability need to be the ones that make the calls in those certain situations. So
yeah, we take all the responsibility once we put our stamp on there.
Yes.
Not your fault. Give it to someone else.
and that's why it's tough to force consultants into positions, right? Where if we do something and then say, hey, confirm this is right or whatever, and it's like you're taking responsibility for someone else's action, right? It's not fair in that sense. So that hopefully as contractors, we move, we're better at that, probably more nowadays than we were before. But it's
What about what about the construction engineers that like design shoring and do calcs for that? Is that like a different type of contractor that you would have to work for?
So sometimes you can probably either be like a consultant on the side, or we have some in-house engineers, and those people are probably more just in the office. But a company will only have a handful of those, at least for general contractors that actually do those designs. Sometimes too, if you have a general working knowledge of those. So what I did on another job is we had to design some forms, and I just had another engineer who had a stamp at the time check what we did. And it is kind of cool because it's like you design it, but you don't you're not the one that actually stamps it sometimes. But at least if you have that working knowledge of what you're worried about, which pressures are important, why you can't just pour an entire concrete wall in one lift, those kinds of things. Yeah, it's you can have, if you have that knowledge, it makes you more valuable. For sure.
I guess that's where the construction PE comes in, and you get your license for that, and then
Actually, not really though, because like that's why people ask me why I got my PE, and because the company's not going to want me to take risks on anything. They're going to want to.
they don't want you to stamp anything.
So I just have it. I don't just have it for looks, but I mean, essentially, unless I went on my own, that was more of a tool in the tool belt type of thing for me.
Yeah, it opens up a lot of doors and keeps doors open, and who knows what'll happen. But practically, your company doesn't want you putting their stamp on all of these design things. So that makes sense. But that is what construction engineers could do, potentially do, if that's one of their like career paths. Okay, so it's
actually pretty. The thing that I found very fascinating was, you know, a form system will come a certain way and engineered by a company. You know, say it was ACS, DOCA, EFCO. But if you have a working knowledge of how to build, you can work with these engineers and modify the systems in ways that makes it more efficient for you in the field. And that to me is really, really cool. We had a foreman on our site that had that knowledge, and he modified things, but he always got permission, modified things with the manufacturer and confirmed that he could build it a certain way. And it made our operation 2 to 3 times quicker. And that's where it starts to get fun for me, at least, where you're using your engineering, you're building knowledge, and you're kind of bringing it together, and it's helping you, you know, be more efficient with the field, obviously make more money, more profit that way. And that's the kind of stuff that's the thing that gets me up in the morning.
Yeah, always new solutions and new problem solving, like you were saying. It doesn't get boring for me because there's just so many different things to learn and problems to solve. I'm hardly bored, so that's what I like about it. Maybe that's a bad thing at times.
Office, you're still not even bored, and that's the thing I think about engineering and projects is, I feel like you would have to be a pretty bad engineer to be stuck doing just one thing all the time.
There's some, like we call them specialty structural engineers, where they do like just do that one thing. Maybe they're like a truss manufacturer, and they have like one person doing trusses literally all day, and they're super efficient at it. And that's all, because that's all they do. Like they're super efficient at it, but so it's like good profit. But I guess if you're that person, you can either learn to deal with that, or you just may get really bored. I know some people that have gotten like really bored with that. But at least in consulting, and at least in my experience, I know this isn't for everyone, but I got to work on a lot of different projects, from concrete, steel, masonry, cold form steel, wood. So for me, I don't know if that's unique to me, but at least in my experience, I've been lucky enough to work with all sorts of building materials. And I'm always excited when I get to work on a new project or a new building material, something that I haven't worked with before. Yeah, it's super interesting.
Nice. Well, how was your, I know a lot of our viewers are in school, potentially. What was your college life like? How did you excel in school? Was it tough? Did you do a bunch of activities? How did that college years go for you?
Yeah, college, in terms of like my smartness, you know, like in high school, I wouldn't really try, and I'd still get like A's and B's. And then college, the first couple of years, I got away with that. I didn't really care about the classes. and still managed to pass them. But then when I got into like the hardcore engineering stuff, that didn't work anymore. Ended up failing a couple like classes. Like I remember failing like a math class, and I had to retake those. And yeah, that's when yeah, that sucked. It was just like, okay, now I have to figure out how do I get better at this and improve my study habits. So yeah, I did have like that kick in the butt to kind of like, hey, something's not working here. How can we improve that? And yeah, changing my study habits and doing that helped me get through that. And you know, when I was wasn't doing too well, it was still at that point where I didn't know what I wanted to do yet. I knew civil was maybe, but it wasn't until I started taking those design classes, which unfortunately was like in my last years. That's when knew I wanted it. And that's when my grades like shot up because I was really interested in it. And that's the way I work. If I'm interested in it, like I'll put in the extra effort and I'll get it done. But if it's boring or if I find no use for it, then that's when I kind of tune out and not do so well. Uh, but but yeah, even then I wasn't like, I think I had like a 3.0 and between a 3.3, which isn't bad uh, for engineering, but uh, I think that was still pretty average. I still felt pretty average. And then after graduating, I decided to get my master's in structural engineering. So I went to UC San Diego for that. And that's when I felt like an idiot. It was like, I thought I was average in undergrad, but then when I went to grad school, yeah, like the average GPA there was like a 3.8. And these were all coming from like the top schools. So that was like definite like imposter syndrome on my part. But you know, what I learned, especially when getting into work, like that's not everything. Like I studied hard. I felt like I had to work a lot more, I believe, since I was like behind and on the theoretical stuff. But that's always the thing with like engineers, like you kind of put your worth in how smart you are, etc. But once you get into the working field and get your job, that always see the ones that are at the top of the structural engineering firms. They have some sort of communication skills, and people like working with them for the most part. They're easy to talk to, they're easy to communicate with, and you realize that not all engineers have that. And for me, I found that I could learn or get better at those, and I think that's where I tried to make more of an impact. Like, yeah, I can get through with the smartness and whatnot and the numbers, but if you combine that with trying to get to know how people work, how you can help them, and how you can work in a team, that in the long term will get you farther. Especially with all the software now, like you don't need, like if you can derive stuff, great, but a software is going to do that for you. Like it kind of becomes, I don't know, it's becoming an outdated skill. Like I think what's more valuable now is learning how structures behave, because at the end of the day, you're still an engineer and you need to make sure that the software is doing the correct calculations. And you don't necessarily do that with like coming up with some long derivation of equations. It's more of like, hey, the beam's going to deflect this way. Well, how come the software's not showing that? So knowing how structures behaves and strength of materials and how different materials work and the behavior, and all the stresses and whatnot, how it should be behaving. I think that's what's a lot more important nowadays, because with computers, yeah, your technical skills are kind of like that's not going to be as valuable, because yeah, we need people that can talk to people, because if we need someone to do a calc, we can either hire a new grad or just use a computer to do those hard calculations.
Right. That's a good point. It's a super good point. Yeah, I went to UW for my undergrad, and then Yeah, the only reason why I did civil, or the main reason why I, kind of started on that path was my dad is a civil engineer. He works for the government, and I also, so because this is why I like to tell people to go to big schools too. So what I did was I looked up all the civil engineering lectures when I was a freshman, and I looked at what times they were at, and then I just walked in one day. So a few days I just kind of looked at the classes. I tried to see what they were learning, and I said, "Oh, this sounds pretty interesting. I think I could do this." So that kind of solidified. I maybe sat in about maybe 15 to 20 classes, something like that. No one caught me. So
Just
but
a walk
yeah,
in.
yeah, just a walk in. But it's yeah, big school. Yeah, no attendance really. But yeah, so that was a tactic that I used. Other people can use that as well. And then my mother told me that she wanted me to get a scholarship, but being an out of state, going to a public school, it's a little tough to get a scholarship. So then she said, well, then you got to graduate early then. So okay, that's sure. So yeah, I had to overload my courses. My first UW is a trimester or quarter system, but not everyone does the summer quarter. But so yeah, so I had to overload my courses on the first year. Luckily, I took AP classes in high school, so I got out of a bunch of those general requirements. And then I ended up getting, because you have to get accepted into engineering school at UW. You can't just declare your major. Is that the same for you too, or could you just say?
For the most part, we needed to have something in mind. Like you needed
Got
to
it.
pick something.
Did you have to
You,
apply to the school that you were, like the School of Engineering, or you just?
yeah, yeah, I remember in undergrad, I applied directly to the civil
Got it.
engineering
Mhm.
department. So you got to have an idea. Like you can change
Yeah,
it later, but you,
yeah,
you got to
yeah,
have an
yeah,
idea.
yeah. So that's why, yeah. Luckily, I did that because I had to basically after the first year I picked, and then I got into the engineering school, and then so my last 2 years I did those classes, and then I threw in like the differential equations class or the matrix algebra class, and
Oh yeah.
yeah, and then I was doing the structures courses too, and then when I did my internship after my second year, that's when I knew I was like, okay, yeah, no, then I got out of doing all the harder. I took my regular, steel, reinforced concrete, and like foundations, and one more structures course I took, but I didn't focus on it. So my GPA probably would have been lower if I did. Took more transpo classes, took more construction classes, which catered more to what I'm doing now anyway. But then after that, I started working, uh, and I did my master's while I was working for 2 years, and then I ended up, yeah. So that's my educational story. My GPA wasn't same like you. Plus, the UW is graded on a bell curve. So for any other people, if you care about your GPA, the bell curve is not really the best for you because it's hard to get a 3.9 or a 4.0 because that means you have to be at the top to get that. So for me, it was I think I had like a 3.4 or 3.5 graduating. But again, too, that's why too, if you take your classes and you like I think probably if taking my civil engineering class work, it's probably closer to like a 3.3. But I took those other elective classes that all those elective classes should boost your GPA. They shouldn't take away from your GPA.
Yeah.
If you have to take those classes, yeah, don't be too ambitious. You want to make sure that you're going into those classes that can help you get that.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, it's yeah, GPA isn't everything once you get out and once you start working with people, you're working with people. Your GPA
Yeah.
is not gonna people aren't gonna like you because you have a high GPA, or it doesn't make you any easier to work with, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah.
So I think yeah, even like GPA helps, but I don't know. It could be different for other people, but when we're looking to hire people, GPA great, but it is more of uh, are you good at working with people and can you work in a team? That's probably one of the most essential things.
Hmm.
Does your attitude suck? If it does,
Yeah.
then like you're not helping your firm if your attitude sucks and no one wants to work with you, clients don't want to work with you, etc. Like you
Mhm.
need to be good at uh, communicating and interacting with others. So
So I think engineering too in itself, if you go through the coursework, it it kind of gears most people to work in groups. I wouldn't have been able to do it and keep my sanity without the help of all my colleagues as well. Um, we had a I had a main core group of we had three of us, and the reason why we got together is because we all three of us sat in the back corner of
the
each
back
class
corner group.
together. That's how we knew that we were gonna jive together personality wise, and
To
then it
take
kind of grew as we went through it. But I mean, for sure, it without those guys and without the other people that we all kind of came together, um, yeah, I think that's more indicative of how it's going to be later on, not you studying alone by yourself trying to achieve the most on your own.
Yep, that doesn't work that way. Maybe in school you can get away with it, but yeah, once you're out there, yeah, no one designs and builds a building by themselves. Like most likely not.
Most likely not. And that's the key thing too was luckily I set myself up doing my internship. It would have done me no good to graduate early and not have my experience. So I always tell people to like, I mean, if you have a 3.3 with experience, that to me is worth more than a 3.6 or 3.7. So that's that's what I think companies look for, and that's what kind of funneled me into it. It would have been lame to do all the school, push through, and then be unemployed for like a year or two just because
Yeah,
I didn't do my
yeah, getting hired. And if we're talking about that, that's one of the things that stands out when we're hiring people. Experience makes a big difference. Like
Mhm.
if you've worked for or interned for different companies or at least a company, that's a big differentiator because it at least shows that you can work with people. Like you're
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
for
vetted
sure,
out, you know?
for sure.
I think the last thing employers want is maybe you're a 4.0 student, but you've never worked anywhere. And then if they
Yeah.
hire you, maybe your attitude is really crappy and you think everything is like, I don't know, needs to be perfect or done your way. Like you
Hmm.
think you know everything.
Hmm.
Uh uh but yeah, like we don't care if you have a 4.0 if you can't work with us and if your attitude sucks.
Yeah.
It's no use to anybody.
Yeah, I do. I think even that's why even internship's good, but even working regular jobs, like, I mean, that's a good practice, I think, especially if you work in the service industry, how to handle different types of people, different types of requests.
Oh yeah.
Um,
I had an internship with uh, uh working for the city and I was like the clerk. So I was people would come into the city and it was most of the time it was like permits like, hey, we're requesting a permit for this road, etc., or construction permit. So that was my experience working the front counter, talking to different types of people, talking to different personalities and how to handle those. So even though that was kind of, I guess you could call that, it's like clerk work, that I know that was a lot. That definitely helps me out, like when I started working, because I could talk to people and,
yeah,
and I could get on the
yeah,
phone. So it was like,
yeah,
in
yeah.
I'm
That's what you
using
do
those
now.
skills, Yeah, it's like
Yeah,
using those skills that you may not get if you haven't
yeah,
worked maybe
yeah,
like a service job, like you were saying.
yeah. Oh, and what did you think going into structural engineering was going to be, and then how it or is it different than what it ended up being when you first started?
When I first started, I went to Cal Poly Pomona for my undergrad. So the good thing about that was It's like a full, it's a school that focuses a lot on the practicality of things. So I was fortunate enough to, when we were designing steel or concrete, we'd usually have, or it was required that we had a professor that had their PE. So that means like they worked in the industry before. So we did a lot of design work. So a lot of what I do now is, how to use the codes, how to interpret the codes, how to design beams per code. So that set a good expectation on how the industry was going to be like. But even when I got into the industry, when I first got my first structural engineering internship, the part that caught me by surprise was that's just it's the design work that you do at school is so little compared to like what the whole industry's like the whole learning a new language with like RFIs, submittals, construction support, how that whole process comes in. You see the bigger picture of what it takes to do a building and all the coordination and all the legalities of it. That blew my mind. I was not prepared for that. And like one of the things was structural engineering wise that caught me by surprise or kind of did a 180 was like, wait, you're telling me the least important thing for structural engineers is like the calculations. Like no one cares about those. The only person that's going to look at it is like the plan checker. Of course they're important, but when you're talking about what the contractors, architects, owners are looking at, they're looking at the plans. Like if your plans suck, your product sucks. Like that's our product. It's the drawings. It's not the calculations per se. But knowing how important drawings are and the emphasis on those and the legalities of the drawings, like they're like a binding contract. So it's like those, that's what completely caught me kind of off guard when I first entered. And that's when I realized I knew absolutely like nothing. Like, great, you can design a beam, but what about all this other stuff? And then that whole other world and the coordination and the people skills that you need to get a project done. That was completely new to me and required a whole new skill set that I could improve upon. And realizing I knew nothing for sure. That's what it was. But I'm glad that the design aspect was still there because that's what I like doing.
Oh, good.
Yeah. What was it for like construction?
Well, I guess the thing would be kind of going into my internship, because once I did my internship, it was relatively the same, even across the two companies. So I would say that I guess I was shocked at, well, I don't even know if shocked's the right word, but I think that how easy it was to keep working. How easy it was because of how busy you are and how much goes into everything. That was quite interesting to me. When you just hear it without being in the industry, like, oh, you might work 12-hour days, 7 days a week. You think 84 hours, that doesn't sound normal, which is not, right, for most industries. But then you do it and then you're like, it kind of did take that, like it got, and I think I was also, you realize too that not everybody has all the answers, and there's a lot that goes into construction for sure, a lot of planning, a lot of thought, and there's a lot of smart people out there, but there's some things where some people just don't know, and you just have to make the right call. And that was interesting to me. Your college experience, no matter how good it is, will pale in comparison to what you get out of working and actually doing the job. There's nothing a classroom can set you up for, really, in construction, because each company will be different, each project will be different, each environment will be different. But it's fun. And I guess more recently now, I'm getting more involved in the legalities of the business, which it can be disheartening for sure, to see how much effort goes into a project and how a lawsuit can derail that.
Yeah.
But it is a relatively litigious industry as well. So, it's all fun and games to, it's all nice to build, and see everything go up. But if you don't dot your I's and cross your T's properly, it can be quite a task after the job is done. For sure.
Yeah. That whole legality thing with I was like, oh, that's not good. Like, you see, for us, like if we see like a clause in the contract, it's like,
Right.
oh, we should really look at that. You realize how important like the legal side of it is, and what you say on paper or emails and anything else like that can all be tracked. So
Right.
even when you're writing emails or the way you do your drawings or plans, I was surprised at how much of that can like come back legally. So yeah, like you were saying, like dotting your I's, crossing your T's. Hopefully it never comes down to that, but I think everyone loses on the team if that ever comes to be.
Right. Right. I mean, ideally, like they say, the best jobs are the ones where you never have to pull a contract out in any sense. But it's also there for a reason. So you really have to know what you're getting into, what deal you signed, and you have to be a lawyer to a certain extent, depending on what position you're in. You have to know what language you want to put in there. You want to know what's important, what risk you can take, what risk you can't, which is not always seen when you just look at the building itself. How many emails went back and forth to build this building?
Yeah, that's why the lawyer talk. That's why you need a lawyer to
or like every submittal, everything has like a little disclaimer about
a disclaimer,
about who's passing the risk on to whom.
It's not ours. It's yours.
Yeah, but like if everybody took every little clause like unbelievably seriously too, no one would work for anyone. So you have to build relationships. You have to have that working relationship with people, so that you can get covered later, but hopefully you never have to deal with it.
Yeah.
Thanks again for watching. That wasn't even the end of our conversation. We went on for another 30 minutes about the business of construction and structural engineering, but I just wanted to cut it short. Maybe I'll post that in another video. Make sure to check out Kienen's channel, and I'll see you next time.